Hello and welcome to the White Collar Fitness Radio, the ultimate podcast for professionals striving to achieve optimal performance in today's fast-paced age. I'm your host, Bruno Delladoni, online body transformation specialist and founder of the Health Coach Fitness. I'm here to help you optimize your health and fitness, even if you're short on time. What's up, everyone? Today we're talking muscle gain and just some top considerations you probably should have if you're trying to get jacked. Okay, first things first, you need to have a net protein balance. What the hell does that mean, Bruno? You see, your body breaks down protein, so you'll break down muscle tissue. Really what we're talking about when I say net protein balance is muscle protein. Okay, so ignore all the other stuff and all the rest of the protein that you are. We're really just talking about muscles here. You have these two functions: muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. Now, they both occur naturally. That's just how it happens. But really what we're trying to do is stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which is the growth of new tissue, to the point where you have net positive protein balance, aka you're laying down more tissue than your body is breaking down. Now, there's two primary ways we're going to do that. And the first one is by lifting some heavy weights and training really hard. And number two is by eating enough protein. Now, there is a little bonus here, which is if you are genuinely trying to put on some mass, you will also need to eat in a calorie surplus, which basically means you're going to get a little soft around the edges, but that's okay because it's for a bigger purpose. Now, if you think you're going to genuinely get jacked without getting a little podgy along the way, let me tell you, it's just not going to happen. You won't sit in that surplus for long enough to actually make any real considerable progress. So if you are serious about putting on some tissue, then just be forewarned, be prepared. You might get massive pecs, but with those pecs will come a cheeky pair of man boobs. It's okay. We've all been there. All that means is that once you're jacked enough, you're going to have to diet down and lose the man boobs. Your beautiful, masculine, chiseled pecs can come through and appear and say hello to the world. Now, that is the sort of mechanisms. You need to have net positive protein balance. But you don't want to know about the nerdy side of things, do you? Let's all be honest. You want to know how to train properly. So, what should you be thinking about when you're training? First things first, stop this. Go back to the other episode where I talked about tempo, because one of the biggest things we're going to be discussing here is time under tension. You're just not putting on a huge amount of tissue if you're flinging stuff about. You're just not. Stop. Slow it down, control. And there is this fun concept in the industry called a mind-muscle connection. What does that mean? Well, what it says in the tin, really. It's your brain's ability to connect and control the tissue effectively. Now, there is a way for you to improve that, and it's really weird is thinking about it. So literally what I mean is think about the muscle you're trying to contract during that contraction. So for example, if you're doing a bicep curl, think about your biceps squeezing. Think about where you're feeling it. Think about the muscle literally shortening and then lengthening throughout that process. You're really thinking about the muscle and its function and how you're moving it. And what that'll do is you'll allow you to feel more, you allow you to create a deeper connection with that muscle, which we all theorize can in fact help you get more jacked. Now, for me, I think part of that is the fact that it allows you to have more time and attention. Naturally, if you're having to think about that muscle more and you're being more conscious and intentional about it, you're naturally going to slow stuff down, which allows for more time for your muscle to be working, which is all good stuff. Now, what's next? We need to take into account balancing fatigue and recovery. As weirdly as this sounds, more is not always better. Now, I would be remiss, this is not on my notes to cover, but I have just thought about it. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that if you are genuinely trying to grow some tissue, it would bear some fruit for you to take some time and think about where you want to grow. Now, don't be dirty, you get your mind out of the gutter. Anyway, point being, right, if you think your pecs are lagging, or you think your shoulders are lagging, or you think your quads are lagging, and you want to grow them a little bit quick, one for the girls, if you think your glutes are lagging and you want to get enormous glutes, then you need to be training them more often, which speaks to volume. Now, you also need to balance your fatigue and your recovery. So more isn't always better. There are things that we could nerd out on, and maybe I'll do an episode on these things a little later on. But there is a difference between the concentric and the eccentric phases of the movement. That is the effort and the lowering, if you like. So for example, for a squat, the eccentric is the lowering part, so you're going down. The concentric is you standing back up, for example. And I do talk a little bit more about concentric and eccentric and all of these fun things in that tempo episode, so go back and listen to that. But the reason I bring it up now is because there is a difference in terms of the fatigue your muscle accrues with them. And so if you're training a lot, if you're training your glutes or your pecs 3 times a week, it would be worth you taking into consideration how you're training them so that you can in fact recover well enough so that your next training session is effective. This also speaks to volume. Your volume tolerance will increase over time, but you need to find out what the minimum effective dosage is so that you can push from there. There is no point in you starting with good old-fashioned German volume training, doing 10 sets of 10 reps, because, well, there's just no point. If you've never stepped in the gym and you go straight to GVT, for one, you're going to need a stretcher. I don't care if you were working out your biceps, you're still going to need a stretcher. And two, like your system can't handle that level of volume, which just means you've done too much and it's actually been counterproductive. So there is that. This leads me also to talk about training close to failure, right? Or training to failure. Now, I will caveat the whole training to failure argument with the notion that most people don't know what failure is. People think they do, but they don't. Like, I've been doing this for long enough to know that people are delusional. And I'm sure you can extrapolate this to every aspect of your life. If you're going to work, you know that the accounts team are just delusional. So this also just applies here, guys. In real terms, people let their mind get in the way of their body. And what I mean by that is that when things hurt, when things are uncomfortable, people will stop, as opposed to pushing through the discomfort to get to where they need to get to, which then would bring us, again, I didn't include this in my notes, but it'd bring us to rep ranges. 8 to 12 is a good enough rep range for most people, for most things, because it's not so endurance based. It's not 20 reps where the lactic acid and that burning sensation is so much you can't deal with it, but it's also, and it's low enough that you can, in fact, shift some serious weight, but it does allow for some of the lactic acid to build up, and it allows you to get close to failure. Now, I, for one, think that most people, now you will notice that I'm not saying everyone, most people could do with training close to failure more than training to failure itself. Because honestly, the fatigue demands the training to failure. So basically, this is me it's a long way of saying that the cost benefit just ends up on the wrong side of that. Get close to failure, leave yourself 1, maybe 2 reps in the tank, as opposed to actually training to failure and dropping the barbell on your neck when you're trying to bench press. Don't do that. That would be bad. Absolute disclaimer, do not do that. Don't sue me. Thanks. Now, that also does bring us to the idea of exercise selection. Your muscle tissue, all muscles, they have ranges. You've got lengthened range, so when your muscle is long. You've got mid-range, where it's contracted but not. And you've got short range, when it's really contracted. So again, I like to use the bicep as an example because everybody can just bend their arm. And it's reasonably easy to do, and you can see what I mean. If you fully lock your elbow out and you fully extend your arm, by and large, your bicep is lengthened. Now, albeit not fully lengthened, you need to move your arm slightly behind yourself, but we won't get into that. If you put your elbow at 90 degrees and your forearm is parallel to the floor, assuming your upper arm is close to your body, then your bicep is at mid-range. And if you fully bend your arm as much as you can, get your wrist nice and close to your shoulder, then your bicep is shortened. Hopefully that makes some sense. Now, naturally, you have that sort of range layout, let's say, for your muscles, and hitting them at different ranges would also be a good idea. Now, what the evidence seems to show is that working at slightly more lengthened ranges yields more results. However, it also seems to show that it's more tiring for the muscle, aka fatigue, which brings me back to balancing your fatigue and your recovery. And this is why exercise selection matters. Because if you're really trying to get jacked, you don't want to be completely fried every time you train. So, the other thing that you tend to see online a lot is people doing fancy stuff that you just don't need. What do I mean by that? You have these things, I like to call them modifiers. Other people call them different things. But things like drop sets or cluster sets or supersets aren't really, but rest pauses. You can band stuff. And there's great reason for doing all those things. However, as a general rule, you should only start introducing these things when you've exhausted the natural progression you can have just doing straight sets. Just doing the simple stuff, plateau hard with that first before you start getting fancy. The only exception to that would be if you need to add more volume to your training and you're really short on time. Okay? Because people tend to run before they can walk. So people start getting really fancy before they've exhausted stuff. And what I want you to think about is that gaining tissue, accruing tissue, is a long game. So you have all these tools in your toolbox. If you start using the tools before you need to, when you in fact need to, you've used them all up. Now, this isn't the best analogy. I realize this, but hopefully you can see. Don't throw the kitchen sink at it before you need to throw the kitchen sink at it. That's my suggestion. Now, some actionable things you guys can take away would be this. Training your different body parts multiple times a week is better than training it once a week. If you have a bro split of Monday's chest day, well, that's dumb. Because say, for example, you're doing 15 working sets on your chest. So that, let's say, would be 5 chest exercises, 3 sets per exercise. Okay? What level of efficient output do you think you're going to have by the time you get to the last set of the last exercise? In fact, to the last exercise period, or maybe even the second to last. If you've been training hard throughout your session, and hard, not, oh, ouchie, I'm going to stop now. Oh my God, my pecs feel like they're about to split the skin. They're so pumped. Then you're just not, are you? When you get to those last few sets, you're fried. The amount of weight you can move is negligible compared to what you would be able to move otherwise. And you might as well split that session up into 2 or 3 and say you still your 15 sets, but across 3 different sessions in the week. So that's 5 sets per session. By the time you got to your 14th, 15th set, because it's actually only set 2 or 3 for that session. No, my maths is wrong. Whatever. 4 or 5 for that session. Hopefully you can see how much more juice you'd have in the tank, which means better quality reps, which means higher intensity, which means more gains, which is awesome. So split those sessions up, get your volume across the week. If you can, allow 1 or 2 days between muscle groups, aka if you're training your chest on Monday, say you've got an upper body session on Monday, allow 1 or 2 days before you attack your chest again. This massively goes for the ladies that think that if they do hip thrust 6 days a week, interspersed with lots and lots of step-ups, their glutes are going to grow. You need rest, or you need to train harder, either or. So allow enough time for your body to recover. Have time under tension, allow at least, and this is, I'm just going to say this, very broad stroke. Realize that different exercises have different ranges, aka if you're 7 foot tall, your squat is definitely going to take a lot longer than my squat, basically 2 foot nothing. Realize that this is a broad stroke and you need to modify this to fit yourself, but a minimum of 2 to 3 seconds on the eccentric, aka the lowering phase, will also benefit you. For 1, it will allow you to control the weight, which means more time under tension. 2, you allow you to think about the movement, which will mean better mind-muscle connection. Hopefully, guys, this gives you some guidance on how to get jacked. If you have questions, always and forever reach out. Otherwise, yes, not really much else to say. Follow me, share the episode if you found this interesting. Rate us, and I will be catching you guys next time.